Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're watching this presentation slide on project management, version 6. Okay, we've considered quite a lot. I think, in the last lap of this training section. So, we are in the risk management knowledge area. So, we will continue from the previous slide. So, we're in slide, I think, 251. Now, we're trying to talk about risks. So we say risk is an event that is uncertain and it can come out positive, it can come out negative. So we need to be able to identify our risks for different sections or different areas of our project. So identify risks is the process of identifying individual project risks as well as sources of overall project risks and documenting their characteristics. Right? So this belongs to the planning process group. Yes, you need to be able to identify your risks, because if you identify your risks, it will help you to be able to know how to take care of them. Whether you're going to be mitigating, whether you're going to be transferring the risks, all of the different ways you are going to be able to handle those risks can come up later on. But the most critical and important thing is that you have to first identify those risks. If you don't identify those risks, there's nothing you're able to do. Now you have expert judgment, data gathering, right? You do some research, right? Very, very important. At the end of the day, once you exhaust this, you're not going to be having a risk register. In the mentorship group, I sent you quite some templates, and risk register is one of those templates that you have. So if you see it, you will see the risk ID, you see the particular risks from which area and what impact is going to have on the rest. So you have risk report, and of course you might need to now update your project document. For instance, before this point, you might not have understood that you might have an uncertain event. Now, once you now identify your risks, it might be time for you to now go back and update the project document. Now, you can have a quantitative risk assessment or you can have a qualitative risk assessment. Like I said earlier on in the previous slide, these are the different types of risks you can have, or rather, these are different ways you can express or inform people or communicate your risks. Now, perform qualitative risk analysis, the process of prioritizing individual risks for further analysis or action by assessing their probability of occurrence and impact. So most of the times when we talk about risks, we talk about likelihood of occurrence, right? For instance, if you say in some countries they have a risk of earthquake, and most of those countries they've developed to be able to build projects that can withstand earth tumors, that can withstand earthquakes, that can withstand a whole lot of things depending on the gravity of the earthquake. Now, I was watching a particular video when it comes to earth tremors, earthquakes, and whatever. You see, in countries around Asia where you have most of these earthquakes very, very predominant, you see that they have different forms of ways they do their buildings in such a way that they have springs, they have hydraulic systems, even within the foundation, within the walls, and whatever. And those things can counter most of those shocks. So those are risks that they've identified in those areas. Same thing if you are developing a software, if you are going to do a recruitment, if you are no matter depending on the area, right? Or depending on what particular project that you're working on, there's going to be risks. And when you're looking at the risks, you don't just want to look at the risks in isolation. You want to also look at the impact that risk is going to have on the entire project. And also going to look at the occurrence, the probability of occurrence. Like I said, in some areas, whereas in some other areas, I mentioned Asia. In some other areas, for instance, in Africa and in far Europe, let's say around UK, Spain, whatever, you don't have earth tremors, you don't have earthquakes like that. So the occurrence, the likelihood of occurrence, the probability of occurrence is very, very low, right? So qualitative risk assessment. So you have expert judgment. Then you're going to see how do you represent the data. So are you saying things like there's what to call the Likert scale. Likert scale. I will drop that in our mentorship group. I will drop a diagram that explains to you what the Likert scale looks like. So you have several ways to be able to quantify or rather to qualify probability of occurrence, right? I will drop that for you. So you can say things like you can use the Likert scale of 5 or of 7. So, but you must make sure that there is balance between the negative aspects, the negative side, and the positive side. So where you are saying things like most likely, likely, might not occur, um, uh, uh, um, how would I put it now? So you have some standards. I will supply that. I'm just saying this off my head. So you have different formats or things like agree, do not agree. So do not agree or firmly disagree is going to be to your far negative, far left, and strongly agree to going to be to your far positive. So at the middle, you're going to have a qualitative analysis that looks like something like not sure. So to your left of not sure, you have something like maybe. Okay, maybe and not sure are very, very similar. So the point I'm trying to make is that with your Likert scale, you can actually qualify. Most of the times when people send questionnaires around, they put the Likert scale to be able to represent the different degrees of likelihood of acceptance, of agreement, or whatever. So I'll drop a chat for you on the mentorship group so that you can get to understand what we mean by the Likert scale. It will help you represent your data. Okay, so you now have quantitative. So in quantitative, we're talking about metrics, we're talking about numbers. So we use numbers to be able to quantify our data. So things like if you say impact, you can say, okay, 3 times a year, 10 times a year, or 10 billion or 5 million. So you're using numbers to quantify that risk or that loss. Whereas in qualitative, you are qualifying it textually. Maybe, or for instance, if you say I have 10 modules of or 10 measures or 10 pieces of an item. That's a quantitative analysis. It's different from when you say I have a big item. I have so many items. So all of this is qualitative, whereas the ones that have metrics that have number is quantitative. So those are the two ways you can analyze your risks. So plan risk response. The question now is that once you've looked at these risks and you have them, going forward, how do you respond to it? Do you just fold your hand? As project managers, one of the things you want to do is to make sure that you identify your risks. And your risk can be qualitative, it can be quantitative. So plan risk response is the process of developing options. What are the options I have? I have 10 staff. There's a risk that 5 might resign because the job is a kind of hectic job. They might resign within a year. So the question is that what risks am I going to put in place and what strategies am I going to put in place to take care of that particular thing that is going to happen, which is negative? Or if I make an investment, I now make good profit. So it can be positive, it can be negative. How do I respond to any of these risks that occur? So this is part of the plan process group because we want to respond. If we need to respond, there are several decisions that we need to make. That is the tools and techniques. So we have decision making, strategies for overall project risks, strategies for threats. Most of the times we're going to be doing some SWOT analysis, our strength, our weakness, our opportunities, our threats. How do we take care of most of these things? Don't forget, if you identify your risks, there are some things that you know be able to take care of, right? You call that residual risks. So that is the risk that remains after the risk responses were implemented. Secondary risks arise out of implementing risk responses, right? For instance, you said, okay, um, you're constructing a road. Don't mind me, I'm always using IT and construction case studies. You can apply this to any field. Project management applies to typically any field. So you say, okay, you're constructing a road. Now, you now say we might have a risk that the road is not going to last for so long, maybe so 50 years. So one of the things we want to do to mitigate that risk is to make sure that we have drainage system with the road. So of course, now that's going to be an additional cost. So now the point is that if we now fix that drainage system by the side of the road, across the shoulders of the road, we might have laid pipes across that line. We might have fiber optics. We might have electricity. We might have Ethernet. We might have several things that we've laid underground by the side of the road, maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. Secondary risk is going to be what if we have damage in any of those infrastructure as a result of remediating the risks of making sure that we don't have rainfall staying on the road and affecting the coulter. That is what we refer to as a secondary risk. Or for instance, we need to conduct a training or we need experts to be able to deliver a job for us. Now, we've identified some risks. I will not say, okay, experts might decide maybe midway the project and say that they have another expatriate job somewhere else and they don't mind foregoing the money because that's what is in the contract. A mitigating factor for this risk is to have contract staff, that is the short-term staff, right, on standby, but maybe not as experienced as the main guys for the job. Now, the question is, what if these guys that have been brought now to come as standby staff or standby implementers for that particular project? What if we now have a risk as a result of them not having requisite knowledge for the job or very, very good experience on the job? We might have a risk as a result of that. So that you call that secondary risk. But because it came up as a result of us implementing a risk response. So I hope that is very clear. Okay, so positive risk response. So one of the things we can do is that we can enhance it. So the enhanced strategy is used to increase the probability or impact of an opportunity. So this is an example. For instance, now sometimes you're working on a project, you might need to put in more money. You might need to do something. You might need to add to your team members. You might need to do something else, able to increase your profitability. A construction project that involves building 6 apartment complexes in different parts of the country is underway. One of the teams is using a new construction design tool that increases the efficiency by 20%. The project manager enhances this result by having the other construction teams use the same tool. So that way, we can construct our designs very, very fast. That's a risk, but it's a positive risk. And we can enhance it. We can go for it. Share. At times we need to share or transfer the ownership of an opportunity to a third party. Insurance is a very important, is a classical way that people can share. A company is bidding for a large engineering project for a hydraulic dam. As the team reviews the scope of the project, it is an opportunity to it it's seen it sees an opportunity to increase the success of its partners with the company. Sorry, sees uh, it as an opportunity to increase its success if it partners with a company that has experience with advanced hydraulic technology. The positive benefits of these risks are shared with the other company. Or for instance, you're into construction or you're into book writing, but you see that you're not very good in graphics design. Why not write the book? Share that risk with somebody else that can do designs. And at the end of the day, you're going to share whatever risks that are assigned. And what is going to happen is that that risk is shared because anything that has to do with the client rejecting any of the graphics work, that risk is going to be borne by that particular person that you added to that project. So that way you have shared the risk. You didn't particularly bear that risk. That way you enhance or you make your success very, very nice. And there's what to call exploit. The exploit strategy can be used for high priority opportunities when organizations want to ensure that the opportunity is realized. For instance, a large software development project has three teams working on different components within the architecture. If one of the team completes the work sooner than scheduled, the project manager can exploit this opportunity by allocating work from the other teams to it. So you are exploiting, right? You are maximizing, you are utilizing. Whereas accepting an opportunity, acknowledge its existing, but no proactive action is taken. So there are some things that you're going to look at, and you just have to accept that particular risk. Okay, so negative risk responses. So you can avoid, you can transfer, you could mitigate, you could accept. So transfer and mitigating is one of the very, very nice way of you trying to for risks that are negative. These are positive risks. You enhance, you share, you exploit, you accept. Whereas these are for negative risks. Transfer, insurance, third party, right? They bear that cost. Mitigate, you see what can you do, like the road project I talked about is an example of mitigating. Implement risk response. So this is where you now start implementing most of those things that you've done in the previous stage. Of course, you have to monitor if you have issues. You're now going to look at all of your baseline, then all of the risks that you atomized, all of the ways you said you were going to respond to them. Here you're trying to look at to see if you're actually following that. Okay, the key takeaways is that risk is an uncertain event or condition that has a positive or negative. So you just need to understand that not all risks are positive, right? Some are negative. Okay, that's that. You have some questions here you could look at. And next, we're going to be look at, okay, let's just look at something about contract. So a contract represents a mutually binding agreement that obligates the seller to provide a specific product, service, or result, and obligates the buyer to provide a monetary or other valuable consideration in return. Most of the times, when we write project scope document that extends to become a contract later on, you don't just write what you're going to do. It's funny, yes, but it's true. You don't just write, I'm going to do this, I'm going to deliver this. Have you come, have you looked at what the responsibility of even the project owner aside monetary value? Because you don't just say, okay, because I'm a project owner, I'm just going to provide cash. No. Feedback through different communication means, monitoring, acceptance for each stage of the project. Very, very important. Vetting the work that has been done. That is our feedback. Most of the times when we develop applications, develop softwares, work on some projects, we make sure that that is part of, so that you see some clients, they will just pay the money and they go to rest. They come back after 4, 5, 6 months. Even trying to get to them is a problem. So if you don't put that in your contract document, it then means they've transferred both the responsibility of the owner of the project, all of the stakeholders of the project, and the project deployers who is going to deploy the project. Everything is now in your care, and which is wrong, because at the end of the day, you don't have buy-ins from the owners of the project, and you can finish up the project and you're going to be told that this is not what we wanted. But the fact is that, did you include that in the contract document? So it's not just provide the buy is not just to provide monetary, but other valuable consideration in return. A contract can also be an agreement, understanding, undertaking, or a purchase order. Okay, so characteristics of a contract: it should be formal, should be written, It must have legal remedies. So you need to put some force majeures, force majeure things that are going to happen out of hand. How you going to take care of it? Things like act of God, things like if something happens to somebody, or if so and so is not able to done. What are the leeways you provide? What are the remedies you provide if something goes wrong? All of those things you should have them in your contract document, because if you don't have that and something happens, everybody's like trying to say this is what is going to be done. But the question is that is that in the document? And of course, you want to make sure you involve your lawyers. At times when we're working on some projects and whatever, we of course project of high significance. We inform our lawyers and tell them, okay, please look at this thing, look at this document, and provide us your insight and help us draft the document so that there is no loophole and something that's going to tie us up later on during the course of the project. Okay, so you have types of contract. So you have cost reimbursable or cost plus. So you have time and material or unit price. Then you have fixed price. So people can say, okay, the seller is paid based on the actuals, what you deliver, or cost plus, or say incentive or fixed pay on addition to the actuals. So you could say you do this most of the times very, very big project. Then it can be time and material. You just in units, right? Especially for projects that are very, 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 very large, and that quantifying them at times might be very difficult. So one of the ways that this is done is by using time and material. So you are paid as per at the time you dispense, and so you are paid maybe per hour, per day, or and the material that you utilize. So they just leave some allowance and you are paid that way. Or it can just be a lump sum. This is the work for the job, especially when it is very clear. For instance, somebody was asking for the cost of deploying a particular project, and he was asking for a lump sum fee. But we told him that we cannot provide a lump sum fee, that he has to give us a scope document, and we have to break things down, and he has to pay using the time and material model. He was not understanding because, of course, he doesn't understand most of these project management technologies. But if you're a project manager, you should be able to understand when a project should or a contract should go through this way, or through this way, or through this way. If not, here it should be very clear. So there are some projects that you just look at them from your organizational assets, from your previous your analogous estimating. In analogous, we are talking about analogy. We can compare between our previous project and what we have now. So the scope is very clear. So you can just say it's going to cost you $100,000, it's going to cost you $5,000. It's very straightforward. But when things are not clear, you might want to break it down in piecemeal and still further let them pay by your time and the material you're going to use. That way, if the project lasts for 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, no qualms. But here, you're able to tell that, okay, I can spend um 2 months for this project, this is what I'm going to deliver and whatever. So a lump sum is very easy to come up with. Okay. So procurement. So procurement is a very, very important aspect in project management. So this is a knowledge area that every project manager should be able to be aware of. Because if you can set up a team, if you can do cost analysis, if you can what was it called? If you can do schedule management, if you can do quality control, and you should be able to know how to make purchases. Yes. For instance, for all your resources, you're going to come back and purchase them. You're going to come back and acquire them, both human capital, both material, both funds. Even at times, people say they buy funds. Yes, financial investors, you buy funds, you trade funds, you invest funds. That is still procurement. Loans, for instance. So, project procurement management includes the process necessary to purchase or acquire product, service, or results. So, both tangible and intangible things. Okay, so we are here right now, we're almost done. So, plan procurement management. So, procurement management is the process of documenting project procurement decisions. So, how are you going to procure? How are you going to plan? How are you going to, are you doing bidding? Are you doing make or buy decision? Are you going to send it out to somebody else to do the procurement for you? Are you going to get an agent to be able to do the procurement for you? How do you want to do that? So you have a lot of expert judgment, data analysis, some data gathering, some source selection analysis. So all of the sources, source A, source B, source C, source, you analyze all of them and now say, okay, I'm going to go for this. So how are you going to come up with your procurement plan? Or what are you going to come up at the end of the day? You come up with this, you come up with your strategy, you come up with a bid document. These are things what we need. But before you can come up with this document, don't forget that you need this project charter to be your input, this project document, right? This project management plan, your business document. These are the things that are going to help you make you, for instance, some bid documents that are not very explicit. Why? They didn't do their homework properly, they didn't do all of this properly, and they now come up with a bid document. So even somebody wants to bid for the contract or bid for the project and is very confused because he doesn't even understand scope. So, but if there is a proper scope document, there's a proper plan document that involves all of those things, they will be able to come up with a proper bid document. So that bid document is able to tell what are we delivering, what are we bidding for. Because if you come up with the wrong bid document, it's going to affect what people are going to bid for and what delivery that you are going to have at the end of the day. Now, once you plan, it is now time for you to conduct, right? So, conduct procurement is the process of obtaining sellers' responses. You now select the sellers, you now award the contract, right? So, you need all of this as your input. Then you need all of this. You might need to do a bidders conference. So, a bidder conference schedules reviews for interested suppliers to ask questions, right? You might need to do meetings, right? On requests for proposal, RFP, quotation, information. They ensure that all bidders receive the same information at the same time, right? You send out the information, you want to make sure people get that particular information, then you want to make sure that they understand what they're actually bidding for so that you can actually put everybody on the same pace so that everybody have the right information at the same time, no preference, so that you can now make a selection. Control. So, control procurement is the process of managing procurement relationship, monitoring contract performance, and making changes and corrections to contract as appropriate. Most of the times, during the course of your procurement, you might not have full understanding of what is actually going on. So, if you don't have full understanding of what is going on, it might affect even your relationship with your bidders or rather with the persons that are going to be involved in making those purchases for you. You can use bid, you can do internal procurement, you can do external procurement. When you're doing external procurement is when you are doing bid. But if you are doing internal procurement, it then means that your procurement department will now handle that together with maybe HR if they're going to interact with people, right? So in controlling, you are inspecting. This is under monitoring and control. You're trying to inspect to see that what you paid for, what you approved through inspection audit is what is being delivered to you. So here you are, the procurement that you did, you want to be able to control it. So, key takeaway: a contract is mutually binding agreement that obligates the sellers to provide a specified product, services, or result. There are three types: cost reimbursable, cost plus time and material, and fixed price or lump sum. So, you have some quiz here, please take them and revert back to the group. And lastly, we're going to look at stakeholders. I love stakeholders because every project has stakeholders. Don't forget, we said stakeholders are people that are going to be impacted, people that are going to be that are interested, people that might I think we talked about three things: impacted, uh, or that have an interest or that can influence or have an influence on whatever project that we are trying to consider. So here we want to be able to understand stakeholders and understand how to manage them, understand how to make sure that we meet the needs of everyone that is a stakeholder. So stakeholders, very important. So here we want to see, how do we define those persons that are going to be impacted, that influence our project or have interest in our project or different aspects of our project. We want to be able to identify different stakeholders on a project. We want to describe them, classify them, then know what their needs are and be able to manage it. So who is a stakeholder? An individual, a group, an organization, even government, even uh agencies of government that are going to be that might have interest in what we're doing. Imagine if you are developing a state of the art hospital, or if you're creating a mobile app that will disseminate information that have to do with the government or activities and projects of the government. They are stakeholders in a way. I remember there was a time that we developed a mobile app, is because we do cyber security. We developed a cyber security uh, um, mobile app. It's on Play Store even now. This is November 2021. It's on Play Store. You could download it. As at the first time we deployed that app on Play Store, I think in 2017, Play Store rejected it and they said they needed a letter from your legislative arm of the government. Why? That is a law we turned into an app. So it then means that while developing that app, which we didn't take note of, we're supposed to get a letter because it's an act of parliament. That act of parliament, you're not trying to put that information in a very, instead of having documents, people reading documents, it's easier for people to read up, go to Play Store, download the app, and read the entire Cybersecurity Act 2015, which tells how, what the government is going to do if you steal information, if you compromise data integrity of people, if you do this, if you do that, how many years imprisonment. It's just the law when it comes to cybersecurity. So it can be individual, it can be group, it can be organization who may affect or be affected by or perceive itself to be affected. You're creating a market. Who is going to be involved or who is going to be affected because their access road is going to be tampered with. So a stakeholder can have a positive or negative impact. Therefore, it is necessary to engage and involve the stakeholder in the project to ensure project success. So different examples of stakeholders are as follow: project managers, team members, senior management. The sponsor, the owner of the project is a stakeholder. Customers, end users, vendors, people that are going to maybe extend the use case of that particular application, software, or product. For instance, you have rice. You have a factory of rice processing plant. Now, all of the persons that are going to be vendors, that are going to be resellers of that, from that resell rice from the rice factory, they are all vendors, right? Apple have a store, Apple Store. Even Facebook, for instance, as of November 2021, they're now trying to rebrand Facebook to Meta. And what they're trying to do is that content creators can now earn money. So all of the content creators are stakeholders for the Facebook rebranding project. For instance, Google AdWords, Google YouTube services. Every person that creates content for YouTube is a vendor, is a partner, is a stakeholder. So whatever they are doing, they must create content, they must push information, they must communicate whatever they are doing to these vendors. Or people affected by project output, competitors, social groups, government, and political leadership. So these are the few things, or these are the few examples of, and for each particular project you have, they Stakeholders are going to be slightly different. This is just like an idea of what we mean as when we talk about stakeholders. Now, stakeholder analysis. You need to be able to classify your stakeholders. People have different power, have different interests when it comes to your project. Now, look at this chart here. It's called the power interest grid with stakeholders. Now, if somebody have a low interest, low power, you just need to monitor them. You don't need to kill yourself about it. Somebody have a high interest and high power, manage them closely, right? Low interest, high power, please keep them satisfied. So, what does this tell us? For everybody that is involved in whatever project that you're doing, not everybody have same power, same interest. So you need to be able to balance up everything and assign your resources, your time, your energy, your team, so that you don't get worked up. Imagine somebody of low interest and low power. There's nothing much you don't want to kill yourself about trying to please them or trying to, you just monitor them. But somebody of high interest and have high power, government agencies, people that have high purchasing power, you want to make sure that you manage them closely. So stakeholders engagement assessment matrix. So stakeholders engagement assessment matrix helps in visualizing the current and desired state of a stakeholders involvement in a project. So you have unaware. So somebody can be unaware of the project and its impact. Somebody can be resistant of the impact and also resistant to change. Somebody can be neutral, somebody can be supportive, somebody can be leading. So you should be able to understand all of that and know how to respond to them. Okay, now in trying to identify your stakeholders, how are you going to do that? These documents, your project charter, your business document, and your project management plan is a very critical, important document. And your project document, I have all of these things as templates which you have in your mentorship group. You see a template, see what it looks like for you to draft one. They will help you, your expert judgment, or how you've been working in the time past, and extensive meetings. You're able to identify them. What are you going to have? You're going to have a stakeholders register. So all of your registers, all of your stakeholders and their impact, all of this change request, project management update plan, you have all of this as templates. So all you need to do is after you've gone through this process, you fill them up and they're going to help you ultimately for your project. Now, stakeholders engagement is the process of developing approaches. How will you engage? You need to plan that. What are you going to do? How do you take note of their needs, their expectations, their interests, so that you can now be able to look at an engagement plan for them? Of course, you need to now manage them. Communication skill is very critical. Interpersonal and team skills. Ground rules. You must have ground rule of engagement. At the end of the day, you're going to have a change request. If there's something that's going to actually impact your project, you want to go back and make sure that you change that aspect of project, that aspect of the project that is going to impact your overall success. Because if the government now says, for instance, that you cannot go beyond 10 meters to the road in this construction project, it then means that you have to go back and adjust your project document and your plan and your documents. All of this you have to adjust it. If, for instance, that you are, for instance, for article writers, people that write documents and submit, maybe they are writers, you might write your articles and you're told that the ground rule is that you don't exceed 500 words. You have to go back and update your documents. True or false? Or you are an artist for a competition, and that for you is a project. If you your vetting partners, which are your stakeholders, come and you make submission, or you're trying to look at how you're going to engage them, and you're not aware of the ground rules, what happens is that while you're performing this using these tools and techniques, if you try to reconcile this, it might mean you now having to make some changes. So this is the process of communicating and working with stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations. Your vetting partner, government agencies, all of your stakeholders, your team members, you need ground rules, you need benchmarks. So these are the tools and techniques you're going to, you need to do meetings from time to time. Uh, for instance, at times you might need to do some change requests to update most of your documents. At times you might not need to. So this is just what you might likely need or get out of this process at the end of the day. Here you're trying to monitor. So communication is very critical in terms of monitoring stakeholders. So data analysis, decision making, data representation, doing a lot of meetings, communication, interpersonal skill. Every day you want to now have your work performance information, your change request, and anything that you need to update. So monitor stakeholder engagement is the process of monitoring project stakeholder relationship and tailoring. Tailoring is you trying to adapt your strategy to make sure that everybody is on one page. Okay, what are your takeaways in this knowledge area? So, stakeholders is anybody that is going to, or group of persons or organization that is going to affect or going to be affected or going to have an impact in any of the activities or the outcome of our entire project. We want to be able to classify them using the influence power grid, right? Or power grid, or because people can have low power and very small interest. For instance, if you're building a construction project, maybe people that don't use the road or they're not car users, right? They might not, most of the transportation they use for that access road might not be their own personal cars. So they're not really directly involved, right? So their interest is actually very low. But if you have a car company that moves 50 vehicles across that route, you need to consider them as having some kind of interest. Or whatever the kind of project, you want to look at all of your stakeholders. I gave you all of the examples or some of the examples that you can use to gauge your stakeholders and know how to respond to them. Because when it comes to stakeholders, we are mostly considering how do we respond to all of their interests? How do we respond to how things are going to impact them? For instance, for oil and gas exploration, right? If you don't consider all of the people around, if you don't consider gas flaring, if you don't consider pollution that might arise as a result of exploration of oil, then you might your project might be paused, right? You might have your project sabotaged. So some of the things that people do is that you might engage the youth, the communities of that environment. Or if you are doing exploring gold, you are mining copper or whatever kind of metal. So all of the villages, all of the environment around that area, they want to make sure that they put them in check. They want to make sure that they please them. You want to make sure because they might have low power, but they have high interest. So you want to make sure that you take care of them because if you don't take care of them, it can fire back. So that's one thing you need to know about our stakeholders. I think that is the end of the project management training. So you have some quiz here, and that should be the end. It's been a long 304-page document that explains all of the knowledge areas and helps us understand fully what project management is, what are the responsibilities of a project manager, what are the 10 knowledge areas, what are the 49 processes. So we've gone through each and every one of the process. So I'm going to drop a document that is the input, tools and techniques, and output. So that summarizes all of these things we've been discussing. So from time to time, you want to go through it so that you can fully grasp how all of these things are interconnected. Because you see, whether it is stakeholders, whether it is cost, whether it is communication, whether it is schedule, whether it is quality, all of these 10 knowledge areas that are very neatly knitted together, and we understanding them will help us be able to deliver our project. Because if we deliver our project, we now become better project managers. Okay, thank you very much for staying through to the end of this project. And I will see you in the support group where we're going to be looking at more case studies. We're going to be exploring the MS project, that's the Microsoft Project 2016 software, where we can look at maybe one or two case study projects and see how to put it into the software and allow team members to be able to interact with the software and know what their responsibilities are. You see what a Gantt chart is, and I think look up to seeing you in that session.